Hello, this is Elena,
And this is Candace.
and you're listening to Cousins on Crime. Hey, cousin.
Hey girl, how you doing?
Good.
How was your Monday?
Feeling kind of puny today, but
Yeah.
I got through work and now I get to hang out with you, so that's fun.
Yay. Yeah, guys, something's going around out there. Actually, multiple things. So wash your hands and just be vigilant, okay? It's
Yeah.
just gross. It's a gross world out there right now.
Cough
I
into
feel
your
like.
elbow pit.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
I am excited to hear about your case. What's
right.
what's it all about?
Well, we'll get to it. It was a popular case, and most of you probably have heard it in the crime world. Anyway, we're talking about Adrienne Jessica Jones.
Ooh,
Does this sound familiar to you?
Texas.
Yes, ma'am.
This is a classic.
Yeah, just about 45 minutes away from us. Adrienne Jones's body was found in Grand Prairie, close to Dallas, Texas, in the early morning hours of December 4th of 1995. A farmer driving along a country road saw the body of a teenage girl on the ground behind a barbed wire fence. The girl's face was nearly unrecognizable. One bullet hole was in her left cheek. Another was in her forehead. She was wearing flannel shorts and a gray t-shirt that read UIL Region 1 Cross Country Regionals 1995.
Specific.
Yes. Police officers quickly identified her as Adrienne Jones, a 16-year-old high school sophomore from the town of Mansfield, Texas. She was identified when the medical examiner received a photograph of her, of Adrienne, who was reported missing that morning. Detectives were sure that Adrienne knew her killer. There were no signs of a struggle at the scene, no marks on her hands or legs that had been restrained, no indication that someone had broken into her house or that she was taken without will. The autopsy found no evidence that Adrienne had been sexually assaulted, so it seemed a little personal to them. It didn't take long for rumors to start at Mansfield High School, where Adrienne was a student. One student said, "A lot of us had this weird feeling that the killer was walking the halls with us."
That is scary.
Yes, an eerie feeling. You don't know who to trust.
No.
So within days, they had compiled a long list of kids that they wanted to talk to. Bill and Linda Jones, Adrienne's parents, had told the police that on the night of Adrienne's death, they had reluctantly allowed her to talk on the phone past her usual 10 o'clock cutoff time. Her new boyfriend, Tracy Smith, had been out of town that weekend with his parents, and he didn't call until 10:30, so they allowed her to talk to him at that time.
That's nice.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure my cutoff time was like 8 o'clock.
When you were 16.
Yeah, probably. I didn't have a cell phone at 16. So it was home phone.
When we're teenagers, we think it's just dumb and it's the end of the world, but I'm thankful for vigilant parents.
I'm so thankful. I know, exactly. And I'm thankful we didn't have social media back when we were younger.
Absolutely. So Bill and Linda, they didn't know Tracy that well. He was a large kid who was built like a lineman on He was on a college football team, and he went to high school in the nearby town of Venus. He and Adrienne had met just a couple of months earlier at the Golden Fried Chicken, where
Yum.
Adrienne worked. Bill told Adrienne she could talk to Tracy, but only for a few minutes. And during that call, Linda, she heard Adrienne say, "Hold on, there's someone on the other line." Adrienne punched the call waiting button, if you remember what that was.
I do, but kids these days won't.
And she spoke quietly for a minute when she switched the line over. She then clicked back over to finish her conversation with Tracy. Later, Linda asked, "Who was that called in?" Adrienne replied, "Oh, that was David from cross country, and he's upset about something." After talking with Tracy, Adrienne went to her room. I'm assuming the family phone was in the living room.
Right.
Maybe the kitchen on the wall.
Yeah.
So she went to her room. At about 10:45, Linda saw that Adrienne was still awake. She was ironing her pants for school the next day. Linda noted that she seemed sort of antsy, but Linda told her, "Turn off your lights and go to bed." Sometime after midnight, one of Adrienne's younger brothers heard the rumble of a slow-moving engine outside of the house. When he looked out of the window, he saw what he thought was a pickup truck driving away. So he just goes back to sleep, and the next morning, Adrienne was nowhere to be found. They're supposed to be getting up for school, starting their day. Adrienne was nowhere to be found. The family thought she might have gone for an early run before school, but her running shoes were still in her room. Months would go by without answers, but...
Months?
Months would go by without answers. I mean,
Wow.
the investigation was ongoing, but here's what we do know now. And I'll backtrack just a little bit to give y'all a backstory.
Wait, I have a question.
Yeah, go.
So they reported her missing
That morning.
and they found the body that morning
Yes.
or that day.
That day.
So they knew she was dead though that day.
Yes.
Okay. I thought you meant like they didn't know where she was for months.
Okay, I'm sorry. No, they knew.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, they knew that they had found Adrienne dead.
Gotcha. Okay.
But the investigation had gone on for months without answers.
Gotcha. Well, months is better than years.
Absolutely. You are correct. So in 1984, Adrienne and her family moved to Mansfield from Dallas. It was a quaint neighborhood that seemed perfect for raising her family. Her dad, Bill, made his living repairing heavy construction equipment. Bill was said to be a no-nonsense kind of guy. He also was determined to keep a tight rein on his children, especially Adrienne, a beautiful girl at 16 years old.
Yeah.
In the fall of 1995, Adrienne was allowed to stay out past 9 o'clock on weekends. If she told him she was going to a movie or to Six Flags Over Texas, she would have to show her parents a ticket stub when she came home to prove where she had been.
I'd be waiting in the parking lot. Like I'd be hiding behind bushes, you know.
Yeah,
I'm going to be doing.
those girls.
They're not going anywhere
Yeah,
ever.
They're in for it, for sure.
But you're going to come with me, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've got my 16-year-old nephew with me now.
I know.
So we have lots of talks.
Yeah. But I feel like boys are so much, I don't know, you just worry less, right? Because...
You worry, but yeah, I mean, I've never raised a 16-year-old girl, so...
Yeah.
But I would imagine there's less worry at that age. But so he also nailed her bedroom windows shut so that she couldn't sneak out of the house at night.
What?
Yes.
I love this guy.
But Adrienne, she wasn't a bad teen. She was a good girl. She took advanced honors courses. She was consistent with her studies. And she was a good athlete and was considered popular in school. She joined the girls' cross-country team to get in better shape. She was so good in the 2-mile run that she helped the team qualify for the November regional meet in Lubbock, Texas.
Way to go, Adrienne.
Yeah. She also worked 20 hours a week on top of going to school at the
Girl.
Golden Fried Chicken.
Girl, be frying some chicken, be running some 2 miles.
Making that money.
Yeah.
She was appointed to be the cashier at the drive-through window because she knew how to put a smile on everyone's face. She wore a hat with a smiley face drawn on the visor, and after taking an order, she would say something funny to the customers like, "Okay, drive to the 99th window to get your food."
Aw.
She was a girly girl that liked to wear makeup, and she was said to be a big flirt with the boys. And supposedly one of those boys was David Graham. A little bit about David Graham. He was the youngest of 4 children. He lived with his father, Jerry Graham. David's mother, Janice, lived in Houston. David told his father when he was 7 years old that he wanted to become an Air Force pilot after going to an air show.
Oh.
And at Mansfield High School, he went into ROTC. He was going to follow his dreams. And just about anyone you asked would say it was clear that David was going places. Even Congressman Martin Frost had agreed to support his application to enroll in the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. Some classmates called him Colonel Graham. So he really seemed to be taking his future seriously. He was a senior at this time and was also on the cross-country team. It was said of David that he always acted like a gentleman, and plenty of girls seemed interested in him, but he already had a girlfriend. Do you remember this part?
I do.
Okay. Her name was Diane Zamora, and she was a high school senior in the nearby town of Crowley. Her family was religious, and Diane was a granddaughter of a minister who led a non-denominational Spanish-speaking church. Diane was the oldest of 4 children. She was just as goal-oriented and ambitious as David. She also was working on getting into the U.S. military academies. She was a member of the Student Council, the Key Club, the National Honor Society, and the Masters of the Universe, which is a science organization. She played the flute in the marching band, and like David and Adrienne, she ran on her high school cross-country team. It was said of them that when you looked at Diane and David, when you looked at them together, you just knew there was a bright future ahead of them.
Yeah, like a power couple.
Yeah. When Diane was 9 years old, she said she wanted to be an astronaut. She was working on getting a college scholarship. She knew exactly what grade point average and SAT scores needed to be. She kept to herself, and she ended up in the top 10% of her senior class. So they had a lot in common.
Yeah.
They met at a Civil Air Patrol meeting at Spinks Airport near Crowley, Texas, when they were both 14. They began dating about 4 years later in August of 1995, when they were both seniors in high school. Diane intended to apply for the Air Force Academy where David was set on going. The deadline had passed for her application, so she applied to the U.S. Naval Academy with the intention of transferring her commission after graduation from the Navy to the Air Force so she could be stationed with David.
Right.
About a month after they began dating, they announced their engagement.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Very young to, a month after you start dating. And they planned to marry after graduating their military academies. They seemed obsessed with each other. Diane was even quoted saying, "If I can't be Mrs. David Graham, then I will die as Miss Diane Zamora."
Oh.
On the first weekend of November 1995, the Mansfield High School boys and girls cross-country team traveled to Lubbock for the regional meet. Adrienne and David both were on that trip. Adrienne and Diane were opposites. Adrienne knew how to get the boys' attention. She was a flirt. Diane, on the other hand, she rarely put on makeup for school. She didn't care about the boys. Looking back at the events of the trip, no one noticed whether Adrienne and David sat next to each other on the van or stayed up late talking at the motel. But allegedly, when the team returned back to Mansfield, Adrienne asked David to give her a ride home. It was said that they didn't go straight to her house.
Oh.
Adrienne surprised David by asking him to take some turns that he knew were out of the way from her house, and they ended up behind an elementary school where David parked his car, and he and Adrienne had sex.
Oh, okay.
So here's where it all begins. A few weeks later, Adrienne was found dead, and Diane and David were moving through life. David successfully completed his basic cadet training in Colorado Springs. Diane was going through her academy miles away from him. In their time apart, Diane started to spiral. Her squad leader, Jay Guild, said Diane was not physically keeping up, and she just seemed emotionally distracted. She liked to talk about David, and she missed him a lot. She didn't trust him, but she still wanted to be with him, from what Jay observed. He said it was very odd how she acted. He said Diane went on crying fits when David wouldn't answer her emails, and she suspected David of cheating on her with a female cadet at the Air Force Academy. Diane began a close friendship with Jay and set out to make David jealous. In a letter from David to Diane, he wrote, "Remember what binds us together," and begged her to not deceive him. One day, Jay asked Diane if David had ever cheated on her before, and she said yes. And he asked her, "What did you do about it?" She told him that she asked David to kill the other girl.
Oh my God.
So seemingly, Jay just let that information go. He didn't report it, and he even stated, "I didn't want to believe it. I thought maybe she was trying to get attention."
Well, yeah. I mean, she's clearly like unhinged, so that seems like something an unhinged person would say.
I mean, but think about it. If someone told you, "Yeah, we killed her."
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
I know.
If she's already seems obsessive, I don't know.
I'd start
it's hard
Googling.
to say if I were there. Yeah, true.
I'd be like, "What high school did you go to?" And I'd start Googling like all the high schools and people who've died and...
True. Okay, so just a few months later, in August, Diane was talking to her two roommates, Mandy Gotch and Jennifer McKierney. They stayed up late talking, and one of the girls mentioned how Diane and David seemed so in love, and the conversation went something like this. So one roommate said to Diane, "I bet you two would do anything for one another." And Diane replied, "Yes." And the roommate then asked, "Even kill for one another?" Diane paused. "Well, we have," she said.
What?
Dun, dun, dun.
That's so
she's
weird
just
that
freely...
the girl would go, "Even kill for one another?" And she's like, "Yeah, we have."
Like, what a coincidence to
I know,
ask this person.
exactly.
Oh, my goodness. So, she says we have. And then she told them the story about how they killed Adrienne. Initially, the two roommates didn't believe her, but the next day they told the Navy chaplain about the conversation. The chaplain contacted a Navy attorney at the academy, who then began calling police departments in the Dallas-Fort Worth area to ask if they had an unsolved murder of a teenage girl. And on August 29th of 1996, he contacted the Grand Prairie Police Department the next morning. Detectives flew to Annapolis, where she was. And when they questioned Diane, she said she made up the story just to look tough. So she had to backtrack. At the time, they did not have any evidence to go on against her, so they let her go. However, she did get suspended from the academy and was sent home.
Wow.
But on her layover on her way home, she did make a detour to go visit David in Colorado Springs.
Oh, well, her schedule's wide open now.
Right. Trailing behind her were detectives. Detectives went to Colorado Springs and questioned David. I'm assuming Diane made it home by this point. But they questioned David. He said he couldn't imagine why Diane would tell such a lie. But investigators told him that they already talked to one of his friends in Burleson, Texas. This friend told police that the night of the murder, Diane and David showed up at his house and tapped on his window. He let them crawl through his window into his room. And as they entered, he could see that their clothes were all bloody. They demanded that he not ask any questions.
What?
And so he didn't. He said they slept on his floor holding each other all night.
Oh.
He didn't tell the police at that time, but he eventually did. So after about, I think, a little more than 30 hours of interrogating or asking questions, with the help of Air Force officers, David finally confessed. He sat down and typed a 4.5-page confession.
Wow.
And some reporters compare the confession to a Danielle Steele novel.
Gosh.
Like it was very, and I'll read you some quotes. So David wrote that for a month after his evening with Adrienne, the first time they had sex, he was tormented by guilt and shame. The perfect and pure relationship between him and Diane had been defiled by the one girl who had stolen from us our purity.
Yes, please blame her.
Eventually, he told Diane what happened with Adrienne. He said, for at least an hour, she screamed sobs that I wouldn't even thought possible. He then said, Diane demanded that he kill Adrienne. A report says that Diane told David that the purity of their love could only be restored by killing Adrienne. David insisted to police that he felt powerless to say no. Diane's beautiful eyes have always played the strings of my heart effortlessly, he said. I couldn't imagine life without her. I didn't have any harsh feelings for Adrienne, he wrote, but no one could stand between me and Diane.
Gross.
David admitted he called Adrienne on the night of December 3rd, 1995, and said he wanted to see her. He picked her up in a Mazda Protege owned by Diane's parents. Diane was hiding in the hatchback. They drove out to a secluded country road and parked at Joe Pool Lake. Adrienne reclined in the passenger seat. According to David's confession, while he held Adrienne down, Diane raised up from her hiding place and hit Adrienne in the head with a dumbbell that belonged to David. He wrote, I realized too late that all those quick, painless snaps seen in the movies were just your usual Hollywood stunts because Adrienne was not dying.
Wow.
Adrienne, so gruesome. So Adrienne managed to crawl out of the window of the vehicle, and he says to their horror, she ran off. He said, I was panicky and just grabbed my 9mm gun to follow. To our relief at the time, she was too injured from the wounds to go far. She ran into the nearby field and collapsed. In that short instant, I knew I couldn't leave the key witness to our crime alive.
This is gross. Like, the way he's writing this.
I know.
Ew.
It really is like
Yeah.
a novel. He said, I just pointed and shot. I fired again, and then I ran to the car. Diane and I drove off. The first thing out of our mouths were, I love you. And Diane said, we shouldn't have done that, David.
Excuse me?
Don't act like you're going to
Right.
have remorse at that point. And because if you did, call the police. So the police recovered the handgun along with several dumbbells from the attic of David's home, and the attic could be entered from David's bedroom.
Oh.
So good hiding spot.
Yeah.
They confronted Diane again, and all she could do was stare at the officers.
With those eyes?
She ended up...
Gross.
Did they pull on their heartstrings?
Probably not.
She ended up going to the station to give her own confession. Even as early as the morning of Adrienne's disappearance, family and friends suspected David. That morning,
Wow.
yeah, because that morning, Linda called the coach, the cross country coach, Leanne Burke, and asked, "Who is someone named David on the cross country team?" And the coach says, "Well, there's David Graham." And then Linda told her, "Well, Adrienne's missing, and I think he called her last night." And Coach Burke, she didn't have any answers as to where Adrienne could be. She didn't even know that David and Adrienne were friends. Coach Burke sent April Grossman, Adrienne's friend, to David's second period math class to ask him if he called Adrienne the previous night. David just stared at April as if she was not making any sense, and he said, "Did I talk to Adrienne? No. Why would I?" Detectives did interview David early in the investigation, but they were so certain that he was not involved.
Didn't they look at phone records? Like, why wouldn't you just look at the phone records?
I mean, nothing was mentioned in any of the reports that I read about phone
Interesting.
records. The only record of a phone call was that her mother noted it. But maybe they did. How hard was it back in 1995 to get phone records?
Probably not very hard, I would think. Because, I mean, remember back then when you had a cell phone bill, you used to get like a 20-page, not that this was a cell phone, but you used to get like a 20-page report in the mail every month. Every single number you called, like you would get that printout. And that was like kind of back in the day. So I would think even before the cell phones, you would be able to access that information.
There would be some kind of record.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, I just don't know how hard it would have been. But, I mean, months down the line, surely they would have had something. But, yeah, nothing in the reports that I read said anything about a phone record.
Interesting.
So come to find out, more than one of David's closest friends suspected that David was involved in Adrienne's murder, yet they said nothing to police.
Gross.
Yeah, they didn't want to be a tattletale. A snitch.
Snitches get stitches.
Mm-hmm. So David even had been seen teary-eyed at a memorial for Adrienne.
If he didn't know her, why he'd be crying?
Mm-hmm. David blamed the driving force for the murder on Diane. Diane was putting the blame on David and saying that it was all his idea and he planned it all. Ultimately, both were charged with capital murder and lesser charges of assault, kidnapping, or false imprisonment. They were tried separately. On February 17th of 1998, after more than 6 hours of deliberations over 2 days, the jury found Diane Zamora guilty of capital murder. The Jones family had requested at the beginning of the trial that prosecutors not seek the death penalty against her. Therefore, Diane received a mandatory sentence of life imprisonment and would be eligible for parole after 40 years. On July 24th of 1998, the jury found David guilty for capital murder. During the trial, Wendy Bartlett, also on the track team, and Coach Leanne Burke stated that Wendy was the one that drove Adrienne home that night that he allegedly had sex with Adrienne.
What?
Yes. They said that David was not the one to take her home. Wendy had said they stayed late putting away equipment when everybody else left, and so Wendy took Adrienne home. So, I mean, with that information, it makes you question, did Adrienne and David have a sexual encounter, and why did he tell Diane that they did if they didn't?
What?
But David stood by his original confession that he did have sex with Adrienne. Maybe David and Adrienne had sex another time and he just confused the night.
Maybe he wishes.
But then why? Then what would be the motive to kill her?
Yeah, I have no idea.
So he had changed his story a few times, stating that he wasn't present when Adrienne was killed, but then he would come back and say he was the one that shot her. Anyway, he was sentenced to life imprisonment.
Did he get the possibility of parole?
Yes, yes.
Ew.
And they both will be eligible for parole in 2036. In 14 years, guys. So, closing notes. A senior in high school, you have so much going for you, a bright future, and you think you can murder someone and just live your life. I mean, they were living their life, but she couldn't keep her mouth shut. And, I mean, I did stupid things at that age, but even Taylor Swift tells us, you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes, okay?
Love it. Oh, man. Yeah, we've all done
Just throwing
stupid
that out
things at 18 because you're irrational. Everything is a mountain instead of a molehill. I mean, everything
Right.
is so blown out of proportion when you are an adolescent. It's not just your hormones, but it's like the graduating, figuring it out. Like people are expecting you to immediately at 18 years old know what you want to be for the rest of your life, and it's a lot of pressure. It's like a lot of things coming to a head at that age.
Right. Well, and they both put pressure on themselves. You know, they knew what they wanted to
But
be
what a
and they were going to be.
waste. Like,
Yeah,
what a
absolutely.
waste. They could have been that power couple. And it sucks because, you know, you're describing these people and you're like, wow, that's really admirable, but you know where it goes and it's like, no, what a waste. And
Yeah.
then to waste someone else's life.
Exactly.
Ugh.
But yeah, this case, like I said, it was very popular, or, you know, we all have talked about it. This case did gain national attention and was aired on court TV during the trial. And in 1997, it was made into a movie called Love's Deadly Triangle, the Texas Cadet Murder. And there were episodes on American Justice and Cold Case. There's several YouTube videos about it, and Diane has even done interviews from prison. So
She's done a lot of interviews, I feel
Yeah.
like.
And I'm not going to watch them because I
No.
don't want to hear what she has
Right.
to say.
I'm not looking at her eyes, and they do not tug on my heartstrings. So.
Yeah.
And it's funny to see pictures of these people. Like, you're like, he would kill somebody for her.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
I mean, looks aren't everything. I mean,
But when you're a murderer, I'm going to insult your looks. So, you lose the privilege of me being nice at that point. You know?
Gotcha.
Like, you lose. You lose everything.
mm-hmm.
It's such a sticky topic about when young kids murder, you know?
Right.
Should they be put away for the rest of their lives?
Right.
Were they in, I
That
mean,
is
their
a
brain's
question.
not even formed yet. So, do you hold someone responsible for the rest of their life? I say yes, because of the nature of the crime.
Right.
A lot of, like you said, a lot of people do stupid things at 18.
Yeah.
And the consequences of your actions inform the trajectory of your life. I mean, you can't say you cheat on something in high school.
Mm-hmm.
You make a mistake, there's a slap on the wrist, or say you get expelled or you're suspended or something. And as you move forward in life, you learn, you grow, you can leave certain things behind. You can leave certain consequences. But the destruction you cause when you murder someone,
Right.
that can never be remedied.
Just for your own gain.
Correct. Like, you hurt
Yeah.
so many people with your actions, and that can never be undone. It can never be moved on from. So,
Yeah.
I say, just don't kill anyone.
If you learn anything from this case today, just remember what I said. You play stupid games, you win stupid prizes, people.
Take a breath. If your boyfriend cheats on you, take a breath. Think about it. Man, my boyfriend cheated on me when I was 16 or 17, and I went and found the girl. And I mean, I didn't drag her outside, but I was like, we need to talk. And we went outside and talked. And she had no idea he had a girlfriend. She had no idea.
See?
And so I said, you know what? By talking to her, I realized she's not the one I should be upset with. She is a stranger to me.
Right.
She did not do that to hurt me. He's the one.
There you go.
So,
communication is key.
exactly. Oh, man. Well, thanks for that case, Lena. I feel like you brought it all back because I was very young when that happened. But I do remember it being on the news. I do remember my mom watching the trial and stuff like that. It's just crazy because that happened so close to where and actually my case next week happened where we grew up. So we're keeping it real Texan these days.
We didn't mean to do that. No. Sorry, guys.
Well, thank you for that, Lena. Rest in peace, Adrienne.
Yes. This was great. Let's do it again next week.
Yeah, let's do it. We'll see you later, guys.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Well, thank you for listening to Cousins on Crime. If you're enjoying our podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating so that other true crime fans can find us.
If you have any case suggestions or just want to say hey, email us at cousinsoncrime@gmail.com. And be sure to follow us on Instagram where we post case photos and information at Cousins on Crime Podcast.